that peeking behind the bars? That's Hannibal. Who's that played by 4 different stars? That's Hannibal. And whose face is detachable? That's Hannibal. And who's everybody's favorite cannibal? That's Hannibal.
Hello,
Hi, everybody. Welcome to
the Macabre Podcast Universe.
And you know what that podcast is about, Jordan?
Film franchises.
And not only that, we exist to prove people wrong when they say
That sequels are never better than the originals.
yes. And happy February, our little Macabre Podcast Universe family. Today, if you're going, man, this Manhunter episode just blew me away, and you want to text Jordan or I, we might be a little busy because we right now are moving into our new home.
Mm-hmm.
Can we say that?
Yeah, just don't say where it is.
Yeah, well, of course, yes. But we bought a house, so pretty cool. I'm excited about it. But we're recording this before that. This is our first record of the new year.
Oh, that's true.
Yes. But we are in a brand new series. Now, this is a series that I had only seen one film from.
Okay.
Which was Silence of the Lambs.
Yes.
And at the time, well, no, we'll get into that next week.
I think I've seen all but this one.
Oh, you've seen Hannibal Rising?
I think I have a really long time ago.
I don't remember you saying that, but I'm sure you told me that. I just forgot.
Back when Blockbuster was still a thing, I think so. It couldn't have even been when I watched Red Dragon. I also watched Hannibal Rising.
This actually does seem like a very obvious Martinez pick, where you guys would watch it.
Yeah, because Veronica also really likes crime.
That's true.
Stuff.
Yeah. And if you know anything about me, this and it really hit home when we were watching this movie. This genre of movies, when it's done really well, really freaks me out. Probably more so than horror.
Because it's real.
It's real, and I realized last night, I think I have like a childhood psychological thing. My mother used to watch, well, she still does, but when I was young, she would watch like the True Crime, Dateline, 48 Hours, 2020, all of those things. Like, folks, my mom would have my dad record every single one of them.
Even
and
reruns.
Reruns. And then, halfway through the episode, she remembers she's seen it.
Yeah.
And so those were on in our house all the time. And it was, there was enough of it that as a small child, when we lived in White City, in the neighborhood, I had trouble sleeping. Because if I heard a car drive by, I'd be like, that person's going to get out of their car and kill me. That's how I kind of felt all the time. Once we moved out to Eagle Point and there was only like coyote sounds,
you slept like a baby.
I slept like a baby. And now I'm okay because we live in town and it's easy for me to fall asleep now. But
yeah, I'm going to plug a podcast that anyone who likes true crime should listen to. I listen to it every week. It's one of my favorite podcasts of all time. It's Small Town Murder. The 2 hosts are comedians. So
we should have tried to get them on one of these. I guess we still have time.
We do. I've emailed them before and have not gotten responses. But
okay.
Maybe they'll respond to you. Anyway, they are hilarious. And the format is one of them does all of the research, incredibly in depth, and he tells the other one. So the other comedian's hearing it for the first time. Basically, he's like the audience,
Yeah.
And because it is based, they only do small towns, you get just very weird, interesting cases because they also go through the town, like how much people make in this town, how much property is. Like it kind of forms this is how people are in this town based on their economy and politics and religion. Super interesting.
They definitely, I would forewarn someone that they definitely ride the line. On a lot of issues and
like
stuff
I said,
like that.
They're comedians. And they're very what's the word?
They're
They can be pretty crass.
Yeah, and they're
But
kind
they're
of like
not anything like Last Podcast on the Left.
no,
That one I
one's
can't
kinda,
listen to.
That one
that
grosses
one's
me
too
out.
much for me. But
Yeah.
this
is just like
works.
a lot of cussing, basically.
Yeah.
And sometimes they do get their stereotypes get a little iffy for me, where I'm like, maybe you shouldn't say that, but it is off the cuff, and they usually are like, we shouldn't have said that, or I don't know. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I love
they're
the
kind of
podcast.
like a little bit out of the old school comic. A little bit.
Yeah, I think so. And all I have
like
to
90s.
say, yeah, I love ghosts, I love spooky things, and I love true crime. And
Yeah.
that's one of my favorite podcasts because of true crime.
But all of that to say
Yeah.
that for me, these type of movies like Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, Seven, even Silence of the Lambs, they really get under my skin, and my stomach turns when I watch these movies. And it's usually like when I am watching them, it's kind of like, oh boy. And then when I finish, I just think, I love this movie. It's so good. But then the next time I turn it on, I go, oh, how did I watch this the last time? They just really, really psychologically get me. And I think a lot of that is rooted in, and my sister is listening. Well, maybe she's not listening because this one might be too intense, but maybe not. She's probably listening to this one.
She was more affected by your mom's true crime viewings than you.
I don't think she was.
Really?
I would be curious. You know what? I'm sure she's listening, especially because this first one, I think, she could watch this one.
Yeah.
I was texting her and asking if she would do it, and she was like on the fence if she would watch this series. But I think she could do this first movie. Although it's intense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, right off the bat, folks, I loved this movie. I loved it. I thought it was, I think it was a perfect movie. It was a masterpiece.
You think it's a perfect movie?
I had the only issues I had were like dating issues,
Yeah.
and they were like personal preferences, but they weren't like, that is a bad decision they made, I thought. And I think that this movie is basically like, oh, if this movie doesn't get made, I could probably, if I sat down and looked at IMDb, find probably somewhere between 100 and 1,000 movies that would not have been made. This feels like you have like your Alfred Hitchcocks and you have your old crime thrillers and stuff, and then you have like this movie, which marks like the new wave of like crime thriller, serial killer movies. And I just thought I think it's a complete masterpiece, and I loved it.
Cool.
Should I get into so it's directed by Michael Mann, who he has done Public Enemies, Miami Vice,
Collateral.
I didn't even write down his credits. I just know most of them. Heat. And this was the first. I've seen several of his movies, but this was the first movie that I felt like I really got it, and it connected to me personally.
Cool.
I know that Heat's a great movie. I'd like to rewatch it again. The first time I saw it, I actually was not crazy about it, but I've been wrong before.
Yeah.
And some of the other ones, like Collateral's really good, but it's kind of too long, I think.
Yeah, I like that movie a lot.
I
didn't really like how it was filmed, but I really liked the movie.
Yeah. But
I was afraid that this movie could have been shot in a similar way.
Uh-huh.
And I was glad that it wasn't. This movie seemed very artistic.
Yes, which maybe I'll just skip to this note. This movie was, at the time it came out, it didn't do all that well.
Yeah.
But it was basically seen as a movie that critics and audience were saying, this movie's too stylish. That was people's criticism of the movie. And so when it first came out, people thought, this is like not realistic. It's too stylish. And then years later, people look back and they go, oh, we
like stylish, actually.
He basically just made a movie like 10, 15 years ahead of its time is basically what he did.
Oh, yeah.
So, because you watch this movie and, I mean, I was sitting there just thinking, oh, David Fincher's career doesn't exist without this movie. And, we all know that, well, maybe we don't, but Christopher Nolan loves Michael Mann.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Like, there's no Christopher Nolan without Michael Mann.
Oh, okay.
Maybe not this movie.
Yeah.
But
when did Following come out? In the 90s?
Following came out in 90. 90 something. I was
Okay.
gonna say 9, but I think that's when Memento came out. No, Memento came out in 2000. So anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, and the screenplay is also by Michael Mann, and it's based on Thomas Harris's first Hannibal book, Red Dragon.
Mm-hmm.
So that came out in 1981. Then this movie comes out in 1986. He wrote Red Dragon. Then in I think 88 he wrote Silence of the Lambs.
Yep.
And then we'll go from there when we get there. The music is by Michael Rubini, who is in the band The Reds.
Okay.
Or is The Reds. I'm not really sure. I thought the music was very cool in this movie.
I liked the music. Yeah.
Also, we've gone through enough of time that all of this type of scoring is like how movies are scored again.
Yeah, less dated. I think it's a little bit more timeless these days.
Yes.
But that's me speaking now. In the future, it might not be. But I also liked the music, what is it called? Because you have the soundtrack.
Yeah, the
you have
soundtrack.
the score. But then the other music they added, I also thought was good.
Yeah, that's the soundtrack.
Soundtrack? Okay,
Yeah.
the soundtrack was also good.
Yeah. The song they chose when the serial killers reached the brink was unbelievable.
Yeah, very cool.
I loved that song. So cinematography is by Dante Spinotti, and my goodness, Dante, you outdid yourself on this movie. And speaking of that, there are a bunch of different. There's basically like 3 main colors of the movie.
Green, blue, red.
Oh, maybe 4. I was thinking white.
Oh, yeah, because of Hannibal's cell.
Yeah, and I saw there was like a breakdown of what it was, but I wanted to watch the movie and try and figure it out myself.
Yeah.
And I think
Maybe not get rid of red, just do those 3.
Yeah, because I think blue is his family and his kind of personal life that he's trying to hold on to. Green is the Tooth Fairy / solving the crime, and then white is the Hannibal stuff. So those were very prominent.
If you want to get me and Micah to like something, color code it.
Yeah.
We, like, for another example, we love Jack White. Guy color codes everything.
Yes, put colors in it. That's what we want to see.
Yeah.
The movie comes out August 15th, 1986. So it's in a few years, it's going to be its 40th anniversary. And the budget of the movie was either 14 or 15 million, depending on where you look. And there's no worldwide total, but domestically it makes 8.6 million. So It doesn't do great. Now it's considered a cult classic.
Okay.
I think, from what I can gather, I think it's starting to get above the cult classic
Cool.
realm. I think as more like film students study it and stuff like that, I think it's becoming like, oh, this is as good as
Anything.
Silence of the Lambs,
Yeah.
you know? So, speaking of which, Mr. Hannibal Lecter is played for the first time on screen by legendary actor Brian Cox. And he based his performance on the Swedish serial killer Peter
Swedish?
Manuel. Or Scottish.
Oh, okay.
Scottish
I was
serial
like,
killer
I was looking up a different person.
Peter Manuel.
Yeah, and I looked him up. He is American-born Scottish serial killer. So he was born in New York, but I think around 5 years old moved to back to Scotland, like his parents immigrated
Okay.
from Scotland. And he is he is known as Scotland's most notorious serial killer.
Okay.
He is a pretty interesting person, I guess. Like, he during his childhood, it was well known that he was bullied
Okay.
a lot. And then by the age of 10, he was known to be a petty thief. So got into the life of crime very early on.
If I can, what does that mean? What's a petty thief?
I'm assuming that means he's stealing, like, maybe it
Like
begins with him
pickpocketing
stealing
and stuff?
candy. And then he's stealing, like, not, like, I've never looked it up, but I always think of it as he's stealing, like, little things from a convenience store. And then it maybe progresses to he's stealing money or more
But he's not
expensive
like
things.
ripping off a bank or something like that.
No.
Okay.
And then, so he started as a petty thief, and then when he becomes a teenager, he's, committed a lot of sexual assaults.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he gets even later in his life, he is known to have murdered let's see, of murdering. He's convicted of murdering 7 people, but is believed to have murdered 2 more.
Wow.
And among these people, it's, there's one that's a teenage girl, and then there's one where it's 3 women, like it's a daughter, a sister, and a mother, all murdered at the same time. And then after that, there's another woman he believed to murdered, actually 2 other women, and then a whole family he murdered. And when he murdered the family, he stayed there for a week and was living in their house and eating their food.
Oh,
and
I don't like that.
Yeah, and so when he was arrested because he murdered the family, and the father of the family had just gotten some banknotes, and he was discovered using the banknotes to buy things. And it was traced back to this family who was murdered.
Okay.
He, denied a lot of it for a long time, was believed that he was being wrongfully convicted. But he is convicted of doing it, so he goes to court for the family. And like it said in here, convicted of killing 7 people, but believed to have killed 2 more. I believe it was, if he was not convicted of the 7 people, he would have been tried for the other ones. So it's kind of like either way, he was going to get convicted.
Did you see sense? He was convicted in Scotland, I'm imagining?
Yes.
Not America? Okay.
No, yeah, because he never went back to America.
Right, okay.
But let's see, there was something else. Oh yeah, so during his trial, his defense, he has appointed defense lawyers that he dismissed pretty soon after, because he believed that he could represent himself better.
Which
is
that's like
very
the serial
interesting.
Killer Ted Bundy thing.
Yeah, Ted Bundy did the same thing. And as we know, because he's been beaten to death with documentaries and movies, Ted Bundy was very intelligent and also very sociopathic. And I guess he truly believed that he was the best for his defense, which is probably the thing that would have damned him the most, you would think.
Yeah.
But so with him, I think you can assume the same thing. He had these lawyers, and then he's like, why do I need people's help? I can do it because I'm better than people. I'm better than the people who have studied to be lawyers. Which,
it's never a good idea.
Yeah. So then later on, I was reading that so he's convicted. He was hanged. I think he's one of the last. Let's see. I'm gonna make sure. He is the 3rd to last criminal to be executed in Scotland.
Really? Wow.
According to what I'm reading, but it's interesting because I read in another source them saying that his mental health was never brought into question. There was no insanity plea, or there was no psychiatrist who tested him to see if he was even fit to stand trial, that I saw. But it's at the same time, if he is defending himself, if he's representing himself, and I'm, assuming that he's someone who thinks he can literally get away with murder and thinks he's so smart that he can talk his way out of murder, having murdered people, he's probably not going to bring up his mental health.
Yeah.
Because he thinks he's fine.
Right.
If that makes
Right,
sense.
yeah.
Which is so fascinating to think about.
Yeah.
But I think, the whole Hannibal Lecter thing, how it goes into that, what's interesting is Hannibal is incredibly intelligent.
Yeah.
But also is a sociopath. He thinks he is better than everyone, to the point. And in this movie, he's talking about how, he's comparing himself to God.
Yeah,
he's like,
if
God,
you do what God does enough times, you become God.
Which is killing people.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting to think about.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of, it just popped into my brain. This is sort of a side tangent, but the Ted Bundy stuff. There was that movie with Zac Efron. Mm-hmm. And people have got to stop doing titles like this. Extremely wicked, shockingly evil, and vile.
Yeah, I agree.
How are you going to recommend that to anyone? You're just going to be like, it's that movie.
Zac Efron's in it.
Extremely
and
wicked, vile, and something else.
Is it a book, you think?
Let me look. I don't think so. But there's also
it's a bad title for a book if it's a book. But
based on the book, The Phantom Prince, My Life with Ted Bundy. So how about just The Phantom Prince? That's a better title. Although Phantom Thread was maybe a year later. Well,
I don't know. It's
anyway,
not great.
and there's like Birds of Prey or The Fantabulous Come on. enough with those. Even Birdman has that very long title. It's like, all right,
We get it.
we get it. We get it. You want to
It's
show
a
that
smart
you're
movie.
smart.
We get it.
Okay, so you may be thinking to yourself, all the rest of these Hannibal movies are called what the book is called. Why is this movie not called Red Dragon? And why is it called kind of a generic title? Like Manhunter. Did you see Manhunter this weekend? It sounds like it's a movie that's starring Steven Seagal or something like that. It doesn't sound like a intense thriller movie. But the year before this came out, the same producer of Manhunter produced this movie starring Mickey Rourke called Year of the Dragon, and it bombed. And so he was like, I
don't put dragons in titles.
Yes, I don't want that. And then also, there were so many martial arts movies coming out at this time that they didn't want people to think this is like a Bruce Lee movie.
That is totally valid.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
But you almost wonder if it is a little bit of a case of maybe if the title was better, if it would have done better.
I don't know.
Like if this came out right now,
I don't
I'd be
think
like,
it's a bad title. Do you think it's a bad title?
I kind of like it, but doesn't it sound like, oh, it's one of those like, B Liam Neeson movies, Manhunter. Like if you didn't know anything about it and you just went to the theater, you're like, oh, yeah, Manhunter, I can skip that. That's like an action movie.
Kind of, but when you realize that it's about a detective hunting a serial killer, you go, yeah, I guess that makes sense that that's the title.
Yeah. I think I didn't write it down, but I think Brian Cox later in his career said something about like, man, that was such a bad title for a movie.
Yeah.
And I think he actually might have said like it would have done better if we didn't call it that.
Yeah.
But it works.
With all the circumstances, though, it makes sense that they couldn't do Red Dragon.
It does, yeah. Michael Mann. So if I don't know if you know this, but he is very known for like a few years before this movie, he came out with this movie starring my goodness, what is his name? The dad from Elf, James
Caan.
Caan.
Okay.
And it's about a jewel thief.
Okay.
And when Michael Mann makes a movie, he like researches these things and spends time with a jewel thief, or with Heat. He was hanging out with bank robbers, like figuring out how would you really do this, And so he spent time with the FBI's behavioral science unit, where he claimed to have met people very like the character of Will Graham. This level of research led Brent E. Turvey to describe the film as, quote, one of the most competent blends of cutting-edge forensic science and criminal profiling at the time. Mann also spent several years corresponding with imprisoned murderer Dennis Wayne Wallace. Wallace has been motivated by his obsession for a woman he barely knew and believed that Iron Butterfly's song In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida was, quote, their song. This connection inspired Mann to include the song in the film.
Cute.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then Mann wanted people to wish that Hannibal was in the movie more than he was. He wanted to keep him short.
He succeeded.
Yeah. Which is another thing in Silence of the Lambs, they do that too. Mm-hmm. Like he's actually doesn't have that much screen time.
Yeah.
But you leave the movie and you're like, Hannibal. Like, wow.
Yep.
And Michael Mann was unable to gain permission to use a plane for one of the scenes, and so they booked tickets for the crew on a flight from Chicago to Florida. Once on board, the crew used their equipment, checked in as hand luggage to shoot the scene quickly, while keeping the plane's passengers and crew mollified with Manhunter crew jackets.
Wow. That's expensive.
And that is definitely pre 9/11 to be able to sneak filming equipment onto a plane. The climactic shootout at the movie uses, which I didn't even realize they had access to this back in the day. Stupid on me, I guess. He uses 24, 36, 72, and 90 frames a second.
Oh, okay.
So that it's just kind of a cacophony and strange and feels really weird.
Okay.
Which I think very successful. Mm-hmm. That scene was kind of weird. And then here's what we always go back to this method acting. So Noonan, who was the serial killer.
Ooh, he did method acting?
Well, he asked that no one playing his victims and pursuers be allowed to see him, while those he did speak to should address him by his character's name, Francis. The first time Noonan met Peterson was when Peterson jumped through the large window at the fight scene. And Noonan admits that because of his request, the atmosphere on set became so tense that people actually became afraid of him.
Oh, gosh.
He had also begun bodybuilding to prepare for the role and felt that his size intimidated the crew when filming began, as the first scene to be shot was his character's interrogation and murder of another. Noonan claims that this led him to take separate flights and stay in separate hotels from the rest of the cast. And while on the film set, he would remain in his trailer alone in the dark to prepare himself, sometimes joined by a silent man. As in Michael Mann. Just sitting in the trailer with him. And
that freaks me the cuss out.
Yeah. Now, frankly, it's an unbelievable performance.
Yeah.
So it is like, on an artistic level, okay.
I mean, it worked.
But at the same time, I'm always just like, why go that deep into something that could really mess up your brain in a very negative way?
Yeah.
But he's had a long storied career and seems to be fine. So and then in the scene where he is dead and he's in that pool of blood,
yeah,
I guess they had to stage it for so long that he became like stuck to the floor.
Oh.
And then Peterson, the main character, he had trouble losing the character after filming. And he, like, after they were done filming, he had to, he changed his hair color and shaved his beard just so that he could, see someone else in the mirror. So it really got into his brain.
Interesting.
And then finally, this movie influenced the famous CSI, X-Files, Profiler, and many, many other television series. And of course, with CSI, William Peterson is the star of the show for 10, 12 years.
So I guess he really couldn't get that image out of his head.
I guess not. But basically, this movie not only influenced film, but it influenced TV and a new side of crime scene investigation and getting in the mind of a killer and stuff.
So there weren't really shows like that yet?
Not to the extent of this, no. So this is I
just can't imagine a world without those things.
I know, because we grew up with it already at its peak of being so much.
Yeah.
But it's funny that this movie is so influential, and yet if I stopped 10 people on the street, they might be like, I've never heard of that movie. And yet it's probably one of the top 1,000 movies of influence, you know?
Yeah.
So cool. That's the notes I got.
Okay, so William Peterson, you said, is CSI boy. That is correct.
Yep.
He's also in To Live and Die in L.A.
Another Michael Mann.
Oh, he's in Fear. Not a Michael Mann movie, okay. Manhattan, Blue, Detachment, and just mostly CSI, honestly.
Yeah.
Kim Greist plays Molly Graham, his wife. She is in Brazil. She's also not the country, the movie, the Terry Gilliam movie. She's also in Throw Mama from the Train, a hilarious Billy Crystal, Danny DeVito flick. I just imagine.
Oh, okay.
Homeward Bound, The Incredible Journey. Whoops, did not mean to click on that. Zoe, she's also in X-Files. And a lot of movies. She's been very busy throughout her career.
You know, it's weird. I thought she died because I looked at her filming, and the last movie she was in was in 2001, and she has no other acting credits, but she, according to IMDb, is still alive.
She probably just retired.
Yeah, that's just unusual, you know?
Yeah, it is. And then Joan Allen plays Reba McClane, who is the blind woman in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
She's in Room, Death Race, The Crucible, Nixon. She's also in The Notebook. And so much more.
She's in
but
the
those
Bourne
are the
movies.
big hits. Oh, and the Bourne movies.
That's
yes.
how I know her.
I know her from The Notebook. And then Brian Cox, like you said, he is in Succession, plays Logan Roy.
Oh, man.
That is worth the admission for HBO Max alone, is Succession.
Yes.
He is also in several Wes Anderson movies, including Rushmore. He is a narrator in Fantastic Mr. Fox, and is probably more that I'm just not thinking of.
Yeah.
He's
I
part of the
wonder
Wes
if he's in
Anderson
Isle
crew.
of Dogs. He probably is.
Probably. I
Gotta
feel like
watch that
he
movie
likes
again.
fitting him in. I mean, Wes Anderson, if you're in one of his movies, he'll probably try and fit you in the next one.
Yeah.
Adaptation. He's also in X-Men or X2, X-Men United, Troy, The Autopsy of Jane Doe.
Oh, he's in a Bourne movie as well. At,
he is?
at
Does
least one.
Does he play a bad guy?
Yeah, he I think he's in the Bourne Identity.
He is
I
just
think.
wonderful.
He has such a mad grandpa energy. Even in this movie, it's like, oh, that's like an old grandpa that you don't want to cross, but you kind of love him.
And I think it will never not be like charming because he is Scottish and his accent is pretty light for being Scottish.
Yeah.
And it pretty much shows up in every role he's in. And I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And then we also have Dennis Farina, who plays Jack Crawford, the Chicago guy.
Oh, yeah.
He is in Get Shorty, Snatch, Midnight Run.
Snatch.
That's probably what he was familiar about. He's in New Girl.
He's a
TV
legend.
shows.
He's a legend. What is his name again, though?
Dennis Farina.
Dennis Farina. Okay.
Then Tom Noonan plays Francis, our titular Red Dragon. He is in Syndico. How do you pronounce that?
Synecdoche, New York.
Synecdoche, New York. Have you seen that movie?
No,
Wait, have I seen that movie?
No, but
I was
it's
thinking it was a
the
different movie.
Charlie Kaufman movie that we've
That's
been
right.
meaning to watch for a long time. But
He's also in RoboCop 2 and a Melissa, so he's a Charlie Kaufman guy.
oh, he's in that one too. Okay.
He's also in the 12 Monkeys TV show, Animals, Wonderstruck, and a lot of other TV shows.
And what I know him from, which has come up on this podcast so many times actually, is Arnold Schwarzenegger's The Last Action Hero. A great, very underrated movie, and he is the bad guy, the Ripper.
Oh, okay.
And his makeup and stuff in that movie is horrifying. Really scary.
I don't remember what he looks like. And then apparently Stephen Lang's in this movie. I'm not convinced. Oh, no, that's right, because we found out who he is. He plays the reporter.
Yeah.
To which I would have never guessed in a million
never would have
years.
guessed. He looks so different these days.
Yeah, we have covered him on. Oh no, everyone's heard us talk about him.
Yeah.
Okay. Stephen Lang. People.
Well, and I gotta say, when we saw that title card and it said Stephen Lang, I turned to Jordan and I said, one of our complaints ever since we watched Mortal Engines, excuse me, is when we watch another movie, we'll turn and we'll go, that may have been a good movie, but it doesn't have Shrike in it.
Yeah.
One of our most beloved characters of the 2010s. And
this movie has Shrike, so
this movie's got Shrike,
it gets a pass.
It gets a pass. It's cool.
Even if it was bad, Shrike's in it.
And one little amendment I want to make to what I said earlier about the movie is, I said it was perfect is such a strong word.
It can be if you feel that way, Mike.
No, I know, but I thought of it more of like, you know how like Roger Ebert, he would have like 4 stars, and that's like the highest you can get, and he had a ton of 4-star movies. So I'm more do that now these days, where it's like, yeah, that was a 10-star for me,
which means perfect.
Yeah.
So just use the word perfect, please.
Okay.
Don't be a technical guy. Okay.
Okay, so let's jump right into Manhunter. Starts with the POV of the serial killer, and he is going through a house, very creepy, flashlights and all that stuff. Walks up into the bedroom,
the master bedroom.
Yeah, and there's a woman and a man there.
And the woman wakes up, and that's it.
That's it. And then we cut to William Peterson, Will
Graham.
Oh yeah, William Peterson, Will Graham. His character has the same
Will
first name.
Graham is with Jack Crawford at the beach.
Yes, and this is already. I mean, I just love when movies do this, because scene 1 of this character, I pretty much know everything about him already, because the guy's basically Jack Crawford is saying, "Hey, we need your help on this case. It seems to be happening on lunar cycles." I don't know if he says that in this scene, but at some point he says that. So we have 3 weeks until his next killing.
On a full moon.
Full moon. So we have 3 weeks until his next killing, and then Will's like, "I can't.
He's like, I wouldn't have come here if I didn't need your help."
Yeah, and he gives him 2 pictures, and they're the victims.
Yeah, and the scene is really good, like you said, for setting up characters. We don't know what happened to Will Graham yet.
Yeah, but right then you're like, oh, so he used to be a detective or a manhunter or whatever, and it got too intense for him, and he had to quit.
Clearly really good at his job.
Yeah. So already, I mean, by this point, I'm like, oh, okay, I love this movie, and I'm already like fully into it.
I think that all the acting is really, really good in this movie. I do think Will Graham, because you said like this movie kind of sets up a lot for other movies in a good way, which is great. I think that because, you didn't say this movie is the same movie as Red Dragon. Later on when we cover
the same story, yeah.
That's what I mean. It's the same story. So later on, but when you do look it up, the Hannibal series, they're both part of the series.
Yeah.
But they are both the same story in the same book, source material.
Yeah, so technically this is not, like if we're talking continuity, this is not a part of what we'll be covering starting next week.
But a lot of people include it, so we are including it. That being said, so I think because of this movie and what all has come after, I think that his performance is nowhere near bad. It is really good, but it is very just the brooding dude that doesn't know how to smile. Like he's very tortured, and he has a right to be. They explain that all very well. But I think it is not my favorite.
Okay.
Type of brooding. It's not very memorable for me.
Sure.
And I think that's only because of what we have now, like what other things I've seen now that are really good. Like I even think, and I haven't seen Red Dragon in a really long time, but I remember like throughout this movie, I'm like, I just feel like Edward Norton just did a much better job with the character.
That's so,
from my feeling.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, so I mean, maybe I'll agree with you. I mean, he definitely is brooding, and I totally not only understand, but I do agree with you. But at the same time, it worked. I felt like because of the way they shot this movie and the script and everything, I truly felt like I was in his head. So
and that's
when
because
he was
speaking to no one for half of his role, and I'm curious if that's what it's like in the book. I really want to know if I need to read the book. I need to read the series because I want to know if the character talks out loud, or if that was an artistic choice. Which I'm not saying it's necessarily bad, and I also can't remember if like Edward Norton does it.
Yeah,
because if he does, that's probably in the book.
Right.
But that stuff is always kind of like
it's hard to make that work.
It is really hard to make it work. I will say that I do think overall it does work for the movie because the movie is artistic, but it is hard for me not to almost feel like that eye roll. Like, okay.
Well, I think part of the eye roll is that we've seen so many stories since then that have done the talking out loud thing.
Definitely.
For me, it really worked because I felt like I was in his brain.
Yeah.
And having that same emotion where he's alone in a hotel room watching something and being like, what were you thinking? What were you thinking?
I think too, I had to like remind myself what was going on in the story because throughout the story, when he's investigating, there are times where he says like out loud, like, "You're not going to kill these people again. Like, I won't let you do that." And he's just saying it to no one but himself. Like, there's literally no one else around him, and that is just really eye rolly to me because it's like, yeah, we know that you don't want him to kill any more people.
Yeah,
we don't like, but I think he's reacting so emotionally because Hannibal's involved. Yeah. And we learn how his relationship to Hannibal. So like in the end, it does work. It makes sense. And it's a good performance. But like I've said, because of what we have now, it is a little bit like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally see what you're saying. And I think that this leads right into this note that I wrote here is like a good crime thriller. And especially like a detective kind of story. What I think elevates it above just being like a B popcorn movie is when it has like a distinct mood and a distinct style. Mm-hmm. And I think that this movie right away, for me, I was just like, oh, this is its own movie.
Yeah.
And even though I've seen movies not rip it off, but borrow from this movie, it's like, oh, this is its own experience. And whenever I watch a bad crime thing, it's like, oh, they're
just trying to copy that.
They didn't set a mood.
No.
You know, like when I watch Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, when I think about that movie, I feel like it's really cold. It's gray.
It's blue and gray.
It's very disturbing. I can like feel the mood. Same with Seven. I can like feel that mood when I think about it.
He really captures the griminess in that movie. And then like to me for Gone Girl, it's like to me that color palette are greens and yellows.
Yeah. That one I see more as blue, but maybe that's just because of the cover.
Oh, I think that way because I think the cover of the book has a lot of green in it, or like green hues to it. But yeah.
But anyway, they set a mood and they shoot them in such a way that is unique. That's what elevates it to like, oh, this is A+ material. to my criticisms, I
Yeah.
guess.
And I think, with these types of movies too, the writing is probably more important than anything.
Yeah.
The story has to be good. And then right after that follows the director has to be good at telling a story. Because if the director is not confident in the source material, the movie won't be good.
Yeah. And just since we're mentioning stuff, another great one of the best, probably a perfect movie. Yeah, definitely a perfect movie is Prisoners as well. Denis Villeneuve's. And that sets a mood.
Yes.
You're in the head of, I would say, Hugh Jackman. For me, when I watch it, Hugh Jackman, my favorite performance of his. Arguably Jake's best performance.
Oh, he's
Too
so good.
impossible. He has like 5 that are his best, depending on which one you're watching.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then basically right away, Will looks at those photos, and when he sees them, he's like, I have to do this.
Yeah.
And later there's that scene where he's arguing with the detective, which, well, we'll save that. We'll save that. Because that was like a good payoff.
That was a good
payoff.
payoff.
Was really good writing. But his wife wants him to stay, but she's like, I know it's selfish.
But she knows that he's going to go. She knows he's already made up his mind, even though he's asking her what he should do.
I thought, what did you think of the wife and family element of this movie?
I think I thought she did a good job.
But I mean, like the writing, the characterization, and stuff like that. How did you feel?
I mean, I think she only served one purpose.
That's true.
But I mean, like, it's to humanize him. So whatever, kind of, it's like, I understand why they put it. And I do think in a lot of ways too, it's even necessary. But if they decided for him not even to have a family, that would be okay with me too.
Yeah.
But I like that. And then there again, it's like, I should really read the book because I am curious how much more that character could be in it.
Yeah.
Because in a movie, you have less time.
I just think I liked how she was acting and how she was written because she felt like she was frustrated that he was doing what he was doing, but she was never angry at him. She was angry at the circumstance.
Yeah.
And I kind of felt like I see what you're saying. This is funny. I like totally get everything you're saying, and I kind of agree with you, but I almost feel like the family element is like what makes this movie work.
Okay.
Because he has something he's trying to get back to, and especially the scene with his son in the grocery store was
probably one of the best scenes in the whole movie for me.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Will goes to the first crime scene, and anytime you're watching an older movie, you always wonder how graphic the movie is going to be, if you're me at least. And when he turns on the light, I was like, oh, dang.
Yeah.
The room is covered in blood, and it was like a fairly shocking amount of
And he's talking
blood and
about
stuff.
it into a tape recorder.
Yeah.
Everything that's happened, which it's almost more horrifying to see it this way than us having the movie cutting back to he's talking and it's showing what's happened. But this way it's a little bit worse because you have to make it up in your mind, the insinuation. I think that's really great, but also it was a really great part for his character because we're seeing how he processes a crime scene.
Yeah.
And he's asking a lot of why questions because his whole character is about getting into the mind of the killer. So, he's like, he sees all of the blood spray on the wall, and then he's like, oh, the husband's jugular vein was severed.
Yeah.
But all of the blood splatter shows that he was trying to get to the children. And then over on the other wall, there's a lot of blood splatter, which doesn't really make sense based on how the woman was murdered. But then that's how he kind of realizes that after the killer kills the people, he sets them up like an audience to watch him.
Ugh.
So it's a lot. That part was very well written.
Yeah. And then we see him, and he's up in his hotel room. He's like watching footage, and this is when he realizes that the killer probably took off his gloves to touch them and
to touch the wife
open their
specifically.
eyes.
Everyone's eyes, specifically touching the wife.
Yes.
Because he is watching like home videos of the family, and he's just like, both women are very beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's when he realizes that like this man craves. It is like in a way like sexually motivated.
Yeah.
For being seen and loved by a woman. but also to be seen and loved by people in general. So like you said, he would set up the family and open all of their eyes so they could all look at him.
Yeah. And so that's like one of their first breaks, and they're trying to find some prints and stuff.
Yes.
And then we find out that Peterson says, Will Graham says, I need to go see Hannibal. And Crawford says, why? And he says, I need to get back in the mindset.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm going, oh, shoot, man.
Yeah.
And this is from only the 2 movies I've seen in this series that's based on these books. I think this is the brilliance of these books, is that you not only get into the mind of a killer just like a detective would, but you have an actual killer that, barring, I'm assuming, the movie Hannibal Rising, the other 3 movies is someone we didn't see why they were put there in the first place.
Right.
But we get to use their mind and see it from their perspective.
That is probably what makes the story more unique than, like, it's what sets the story apart from other detective stories.
Yeah.
It is so unusual.
And so then when Will shows up at the cell, first of all, unbelievably shot. It is so cool because every single shot in that first scene, you're seeing into the other side of the bars from behind the bars.
Yeah.
So every shot you see bars, and you see the separation between Hannibal and Will. And what's cool is later when you go in there, the bars are not separating them as much. And it's usually shot from Hannibal's perspective from then on, because Hannibal has like the upper hand from then on in the movie.
Yeah. And what's crazy is, so
that's so cool.
Hannibal's a serial killer who has been convicted and is in jail, but he is so cunning and smart. You know, he has weaseled his way into getting all of his books that he wants. He even gets phone calls.
Yeah.
And he probably shouldn't be getting phone calls.
Yeah.
And we see why. But we can talk about this scene more.
Yeah, well, it's the the Jodie Foster scene of this movie.
Yeah.
I will say I think that I think I like Anthony Hopkins a little bit more, but I think they play it differently enough that it's like, oh, this is just cool that Brian Cox is doing this, and he's almost playing like a laid back genius.
Yeah.
Whereas Hopkins is a little more like, I'm intense.
Well, he
I'm
looks
in your
hungry.
face, and oh yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. And this one's more like, oh, I just don't like how comfortable this guy is.
Yes.
Is how Brian Cox is playing it. And so they're talking, and Will's trying to get him to help him with the case. And he eventually gives him the files, and then Hannibal or Will, I love this. When he walks out of the cell, he runs out of the building. And there's these beautiful shots. They shot it in like a museum in Atlanta. So it's just
I was curious where that was. It was very cool.
Yeah. And this beautiful stairway. And you can tell that Will is like, can't stand that he was in the same room as Hannibal.
Yeah.
And there's some mention about like Hannibal physically hurt him, but we don't really know what that means yet.
Yes.
And when he goes outside, this reporter played by Stephen Lang,
apparently,
he takes a picture, and then the next day it's like Manhunter seeks help of a Hannibal to find
and Graham is already
Tooth Fairy
pretty
killer.
Yeah. Graham is already pretty famous for his work on Hannibal.
Yeah.
And so and like I'm sure it was very well covered in the news that he was put in like he was put in the psychiatric ward of a hospital because of that experience. So he's like kind of salacious news.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then after that, do we go to like the police station area?
Well, I think right after that is when Hannibal then calls.
Okay.
And he finds Will's home address, and then
not only does Hannibal get calls, he gets private calls. Which, I mean, maybe that's the right of the prisoner. I have no idea.
Like, well, and this is like, this is the 80s, so I think maybe like maybe they couldn't monitor or something. I don't know. Or maybe it's just the contrivance of the movie.
Yeah, maybe. And that's fine, because it was very chilling, because he's talking to someone to get his address, and he's just being so smooth and like,
you know what
conversational.
He was doing? No. He broke open the phone and he touched aluminum, and I bet.
Oh, we didn't even see that part.
Yeah, he had a piece of gum
Oh.
And he broke open the phone and he touches
so
something.
it couldn't be tracked.
That's what it was, I'm sure.
And
they didn't even tell us that. And that was probably Michael Mann talking to that serial killer, doing research and finding out that people do that in
was
prison.
Looking at my phone at that moment of the movie. Whoops.
What were you doing? Looking at your phone?
I don't know. Like my mom probably texts me. But
I was teasing you.
Oh, okay. But yeah, so he gets Graham's home address. Crazy.
Yeah.
And we're not 100% sure like what he is doing yet.
No,
but we know it's not going to be good.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sitting there and I'm going, I know that in Silence of the Lambs, like Hannibal escapes and stuff, but I'm thinking he didn't do that. There's no way he does it in this story as well.
Yeah.
But I'm like, how would he have the upper hand? He's behind bars.
Yeah.
But that's the
But it's
scary
Hannibal.
part of it. Yeah. And so then Will goes to the second house where the other murder's at.
And he's trying to investigate how, I guess, like where the murderer could have a vantage point.
Yeah.
Of studying the family and knowing when they go to bed based on the location of this house. That's when he goes into the woods. He finds like a wrapper of a candy bar, and then he climbs up a tree because his intuition tells him to because of a rope.
Yeah, you can see now he's starting to get into the mindset.
Yeah, he's like, I would probably go up here because once he goes up into the tree, he gets an even better view of the house, and then he even sees a branch that was cut down so that he could see better. And then there was also a carving into the tree that they later analyzed, and it is a Chinese symbol for good luck and gambling, and it is also on mahjong, a symbol on mahjong, which is a game, Chinese game.
Did they say that in the movie?
They did.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Oh no, actually, I'm a mahjong master. You didn't know that. But also, I think they said as a symbol for red dragon.
Okay.
They might not have actually like literally said that, but it has to do with the red dragon stuff.
Well, and you know, actually, because I guess the serial killer has like a huge red dragon tattoo on his back.
They don't show us that in this movie, do they?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think they even filmed it, but they cut it.
For whatever reason.
For whatever reason. And so it almost does make sense that they didn't. Like, if you saw the movie and you're like, this is called Red Dragon, I think you'd walk out and you'd go, why was that called Red Dragon?
Yeah.
That might have been another reason why they didn't call it that. Because there's not really any references beside this one little moment.
Let me just tell you, from my memory, they get into it way more in the other movie.
I saw just looking through like notes and stuff that it did say like in the other movie the tattoo is shown like quite a bit and stuff like that.
And I even think that the mythology behind it is explored a lot more.
That's exciting to me though, because I don't want to see this movie just shot by a less good director.
Oh yeah,
I want to see a different movie.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of don't want to support Red Dragon, but we'll get into that when we talk about that director.
Yes.
Who will be added to our He Who Shall Not Be Named list of directors.
Yes. So are we now at the police station where they're... Oh, is this when he gets the note?
Yes, but I just want to say one thing. Another brilliant thing about this movie. So we spent all this time with Will, like, going through the trees and looking into the house. And then at the end of the movie, when they find the killer's house, he's in the trees again, but this time he is, like, the stalker and the murderer is the prey.
What are you talking about? Oh, at the end of the movie?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's almost like he's fully gotten into...
I didn't think about that.
...the killer's mindset, and
Very
now
cool.
He's stalking his prey.
And that's when I think movies are fun.
Yep. But instead of choosing to, do something bad, he sees that the killer's going to hurt someone, and he chooses to help the hurt person. Mm-hmm. So he fully follows his arc of, like, becoming the killer, but he still chooses
but for
good.
Justice.
Yeah. But yeah, let's talk about the note now. And
so who's the note sent to? Is it sent to Hannibal, but it's confiscated, or is it sent to the police station?
So they find it in Hannibal's
book.
In a book that he got.
Okay.
And this is one of those.
This is the part of the movie where it gets really convoluted, and not even in a bad way.
No, this was when we turned and we said, oh, this is like the scene that when you've watched the movie 2, 3, 4 times, you're like, okay, now I think I get everything.
Yeah,
because that's how a detective story should be.
Yeah, and all I care right now is this is fun.
Yeah.
And like I've said before, when I am enjoying a movie a lot, like convoluted movies, like I've said before, especially gangster movies, I have a really hard time even knowing what's going on.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of just being swept away with what's happening.
But so the Tooth Fairy got it to him in a book, and it's toilet paper, and it's a message to Hannibal.
Yes. And it says something about, like, he is becoming the Red Dragon, or I am becoming. Very cryptic, but then he mentions Graham by name, like he can't wait to meet him, I think.
Yeah.
And then he signs it with avid fan. But it, like, sent to Hannibal, so avid fan of Hannibal. And then part of the note was even destroyed by Hannibal.
Yeah. And
they later investigate that, and there's only like partial symbols that they can find.
Yeah, and this part is like, come on. I mean, audience, can you tell that I love this movie? I can't help but talk about it. I love this movie. It's so good. But so that they take the toilet paper and they get Hannibal out of his cell, and unbeknownst to Hannibal, they're like, we have 3 hours that we can analyze this without him being suspicious, and we can put it back in his note to save face.
Yes, that's right.
And so there's all this cool CSI stuff.
Not only that, there was a bite mark on the toilet paper.
Yes.
Because everyone's calling him the Tooth Fairy, which I never was totally sure why.
And I bet we'll figure that out when we watch Red Dragon in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, probably. Because earlier, I think even in this scene or earlier in the movie, there was a guy with a mold of one of the victim's teeth.
And I think I just missed one sentence he said.
And I was because I'm pretty sure he said one of the women's teeth.
Yeah.
And he particularly talked about her incisors, and it almost sounded like he said that they were removed and changed. Or there was a mold taken of her teeth, maybe. Because later on we see the Red Dragon put in teeth.
But I mean, of course, I didn't say this to you, but a little bit into this podcast, I thought, let's just see if we can get around that, and then we'll explain it more when we talk Red Dragon.
I know, but I just want to.
No,
it's just
I know.
interesting because
I just didn't want the audience to know we didn't catch that.
Because in the note, he talks about how I think it's in the note, he does not, being called the Tooth Fairy is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
He thinks. But then he also puts a bite mark.
Well, no, I don't think the killer thinks it's ridiculous. I think the FBI guy says, I don't want this name getting out.
But I think that in the note, he also talks about it.
Oh, okay.
I think.
Anyway.
Yeah.
But there's this great scene, and it's what we now know is the birth of all these TV shows, like CSI and stuff, where they're analyzing the toilet paper and all this stuff.
Trying to get a fingerprint on it.
Yeah, and they don't really have enough time to totally find stuff. But they find a little information, and they find these references to biblical passages.
That end up not being real.
Yes. And so it's like a code they have to decode. So, it says Micah 16:10. And so they're going, it's got to be some sort of book that Hannibal has. And later in the movie, and I had a suspicion, and I was because I was so invested in this movie, I'm like, I hope it's not this. But when they're like, we don't know what this message says, and then Will says, just run it anyway, because they're running, Hannibal took out an ad in a paper, and that's where this message is. And he says, just run it anyway. And it's Will Graham's home address.
That's right.
And when they were doing that scene, I was like, please don't be his home address, because I was so invested, and I just go, it's not going to be. But I was like, it's definitely his home address.
And throughout this, they also finally get a fingerprint of the murderer, but he's not in the system, which means he doesn't have a prior criminal past. So they can't use any fingerprints to help them.
Yeah. And then Will, there's some baiting. They're trying to bait the killer. And Will walks outside at night, and this jogger comes up, and he stops him, and it's not the guy.
Because I think they put a personal ad in the paper disguising themselves as Hannibal.
Yes. Well, they take they do that. I think. No, actually, I don't think they do that. But he takes a picture with Stephen Lang.
That's what it is.
And they
not only that, they do an interview with Stephen Lang.
Yeah.
And in the interview, the detectives are telling him that they believe that the murderer is gay and is impotent, and they're saying all of these false things that they believe to provoke the murderer.
Yes.
And that's when they do the whole thing. That's not the murderer that Graham runs into. It's just a jogger.
But the Tooth Fairy killer goes and he grabs the reporter.
Yes, because he is provoked, but he knew that he was trying to be provoked.
Yeah.
Smart boy.
And when he gets him in his house, and he's wearing nylon on the upper half of his face, so you can't really see his face, the killer. And he's making Stephen Lang look at him.
Yeah.
And it's I don't know, because I don't know my full, the history. I don't know everything about movies. I'd like to think I do, but I definitely don't. But this felt like, it just felt like this performance is maybe one of the most influential like performances. Because he's doing some weird stuff that I've seen about 3,000 other times by other actors.
I agree with that. He's being very slow.
I think he like broke new ground with this performance.
Yeah, he's just acting very like gentle.
It was
slow.
so scary.
Yeah, and even a little soft spoken, but he is such a tall person.
Yeah.
He's towering. And I think it is a little unusual. It's just not as like he has like really white, like blonde hair.
Yeah.
And he has a cleft lip, which I know is added. That's in the story because Ray Fiennes has a cleft lip in the Red Dragon. So it's just like he,
Ray Fiennes is that guy.
Yes. Sorry for that's a bummer for you.
Oh, no, that
Shouldn't
makes
have
sense.
said it. But
well, I know the story now, so.
Well, yeah, but like I think that shows he believes, he has a facial deformity. Therefore, people don't want to look at him. I think it's just another layer of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dang. There's sirens. We got to shut this podcast down.
So he makes Lang. He wrote something for Lang to say, and he makes him read it into a tape recorder, and it's basically just saying like I lied.
Yeah, all those things I printed about you aren't true.
Yeah.
And then the next scene, we see a man on fire in a wheelchair going down into a parking garage, and it's Stephen Lang.
And he doesn't die, apparently.
He doesn't?
They're in the hospital, and they're like, has he regained consciousness yet?
Oh.
I don't know if he ends up dying. That's kind of the end of his character.
Jeez.
But I don't see how one could survive.
Well, people do survive
I
crazy
remember,
burns.
because I haven't seen this movie, I've seen Red Dragon. This happens in Red Dragon. Newsflash.
Stop saying
and I'm not
what
going to
happens.
tell you who it is.
Okay.
But I think I have seen that scene before I saw the movie, and I was a little too young to see it. And it really has like burned, pun intended, burned an image in my brain that really makes me feel
Well, who's
scared.
the reporter?
You want me to tell you for real?
I mean, it doesn't really matter.
Philip Seymour.
Oh, cool. Oh, man. That'll be the first time we cover Philip Seymour on this podcast, but it won't be the last.
No.
Because whenever we cover Mission Impossible...
No, wait, we covered him in Hunger Games.
Oh, yeah. I guess it'll be the second time, and then someday we'll do Mission Impossible. We're building up to that. That's almost like our series finale is Mission Impossible.
Yeah.
But probably not. We're going to do this until we die.
Okay.
And so now they break that code, and Will's family has to move away. I cannot believe how we have covered movies with way less complex plots, and we have not covered them this well.
I agree.
I think I'm just so into it, I don't want to miss a beat.
It's a detective movie, so it is about the details. So when you're watching it, you have to pay a different type of attention
That's true.
to movies like this. So I think that's why. And we enjoyed it. So
yeah. And when they move away, this is when we have one of the best scenes in the movie, maybe the best, where...
Well, I just want to build up to it. So they move into this like witness protection house. And, first of all, we have to even say before that, so they find out that Hannibal gave Red Dragon his home address, Graham's home address. And then it cuts to soon after that, his wife in bed and his son comes to her and is like, I think someone's trying to get in the house.
Yeah.
That was really scary because you see like a shadow of a person too.
But it's the police.
And it's the police.
Yeah.
So they're in the new house, and the son is like telling like, Mom, I'm in the kitchen. Like it's shown that the kid will not leave the mom alone with dad.
Yeah.
Because it's never really been explained to the son what happened to dad. Therefore, the son at this point is kind of scared of dad.
Yeah.
So then the mom says like he wants to talk to you about it face to face.
Yeah.
So they go to the grocery store. And that's when Graham tells his son basically edited version for the kid what happened to him.
That he got into the mindset of this Hannibal guy.
Mm-hmm.
And when he went to see this psychiatrist who was Hannibal, who had murdered these girls.
Well, he already suspected him.
Yeah, but he saw, like when he walked in, he just knew it was him.
I think he saw a book.
There was something about a book.
Yeah.
But he also said he immediately just knew it was him.
Yeah.
And so he runs out
to call the
he
police.
Calls the police, and then Hannibal attacks him physically.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says, my body healed, but then the doctors told me that my brain had not healed.
So that's because his son was like, you went to a mental institution. And he's like, no, I was in a hospital.
Yeah.
And I was sent to the psychiatric ward of the hospital.
And I think this movie actually handles that really well. Like to me, I feel like this movie encourages like being safe about your mental health.
Yeah, I mean,
like that's unusual for movies of this time period.
Totally.
To be like to not ostracize this character and say he's a weirdo for having this happen to him.
And I liked when the son's like, what kind of thoughts did you have? And all he says is the worst thoughts anyone can have. Were my thoughts. And then so that was just, the acting was just incredible. I love, so that, Graham tells his son all about this stuff. And then his son, is just kind of looking around and is like, you like Folgers coffee, right? It was just really sweet.
Good. Also, again, Dante Spinotti, you shot this scene
really well.
Unbelievably well.
Very good. And then just Peterson's performance is sublime. Soon after that, we and I know I'm probably skipping over stuff to get to this part, but Hannibal is on the phone with Graham again. And Graham's trying to get information out of him. However, Hannibal, is too smart and is just trying to like have a conversation with him. And it's talking about like, basically, I know what you were thinking, and I know how you and I are the same person. Like we share the same thoughts, to which Graham is like, don't talk about that.
Yeah.
But that's when Hannibal is talking about how, God kills people all the time and gets away with it and is fine with it. And if one person kills as enough people, they could probably become God.
Yeah, and frankly, I think Hannibal, maybe check your theology at the door here.
Oh, a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. But he really gets under Graham's skin. And I think you just learn a little bit more about their relationship, obviously, in that scene.
And then we spend a lot of time with the Tooth Fairy Killer. We find out he's working at this like photo place.
That develops film and photo.
Yeah, and there's this blind woman that's there, and he takes her home.
Mm-hmm.
And when
they share a passionate night together.
Yeah, and actually, I feel like, so they have sex, and when
a passionate night together.
Yeah, and she like puts the moves on him, and like you said, she's blind, so the first person that's really accepting him can't even see him, which is a lot of like
there's a lot
irony.
There's a lot of irony and a lot of just
symbolism,
baggage and crazy stuff to that. And it gets to the point where he truly seems happy for the first time.
But before that, I just think that in the sex scene, it was done, and Tom Noonan's acting is so weird because he like is not wanting to like touch her and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's weirder than if they would have done like a weird sex scene.
Yeah.
It was so much weirder seeing him just like uncomfortable with what was happening.
Uncomfortable with normal.
Yeah.
And what was I going to say?
You saying that he like the next morning he seems like he's happy.
Yeah, he seems, he tells her he wants to see her again.
Yeah.
And like when can I see you again? And it makes you think if what is going to happen next doesn't happen, all of the bad stuff, and if this was a normal relationship, would he never kill anyone again?
Yeah.
Because he's like finally been accepted. Interesting thing to think about. And I'm curious if the book explores it.
Yeah.
Again,
I hope
need
these
to read
books
the book.
are as good as the movies.
I bet they are.
Well, you just never know if this is not a case of like, well, Michael Mann's a genius, Jonathan Demme's a genius, and they adapted these books into better than their movies. You never know, because sometimes that does happen. But I bet the books.
But this guy is
like,
the brain behind Hannibal, so
I know
the books are probably pretty dang good.
Because it could be a case of and this one's more just an opinion, but I like Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Fincher's movie, better than I liked the book.
I think I agree with that. Yes.
But the book is
really
not
good.
bad by any means.
No, they're really good. The two that I've read.
The one that I've read was really good.
Yeah.
But okay, so then we see this moment where Will has a breakthrough in the case, where he's watching the footage and he's like, the locks. He's having this whole thing about like, oh, this person saw this footage that I'm looking at because of things they would have brought to the crime scene, which I'm not going to explain all of that. And I think it's in that same scene, his like captain or Crawford is like, it's too late. It's the day of the murder. There's nothing we can do about it. Like, just start working on the next one. And he said, you knew when you gave me those 2 photos that I was going to do this. You basically, it was a foregone conclusion that I would help in this, and you forced me to do this. So don't you dare tell me this is too late.
And then he's also saying, the captain, that there is no connection between these 2 families. There's no way. And then we also didn't say that throughout the movie, when we've been introduced to the Red Dragon character, he has been studying a new family. He's been watching a lot of footage. Like when the blind woman is at his house, he's watching something and she asks him what it is, and he just says it's homework while he's just watching this family that he's probably going to murder.
That scene was... But all that... So Will is like... And he finally goes... He calls and he says, look at these tapes.
He calls evidence.
Yeah, and say, where were they developed? Because there's like a little tag on them where they were developed. And they're like, oh, it's 2 different places. And he goes, peel back the second one.
Yeah. And his captain's face is just like, oh,
and he peels it back. And then they're like, okay, we're going to St. Louis right now. Because they now know that it's an employee of that place.
And then at that point, they can narrow it down to, I mean, I can't remember exactly how they got here, but they can narrow it down to what type of person it probably is.
Yeah.
Because they were talking to the police force to look up licenses. And they were like, he is going to be a Caucasian male between 20 and 40 years old. They knew that he was really tall for some reason. And probably based on how the murders were committed.
Yeah.
They kind of, like forensics, were able to figure out that he was 6'7", around there.
And so they're like flying on a jet. And they're like
they knew his hair type because they had hair from the scene. Sorry.
Yeah, and they're faxing like these images and stuff, and you're like, they got to get him. Meanwhile, the killer was watching the blind woman, which makes me think he definitely would have not stopped killing because he was stalking this woman.
He's too sick to not do it.
And we see this weird point of view where it's like shiny behind them, and he's seeing like a warped perception of what's really going on.
The woman being with another man.
And it seems like the man is just like, good night. I think
just a coworker drove his coworker home because he's a good guy.
But he sees them like being somewhat intimate together in this weird backlit thing, another artistic thing.
And that's when that one song in the movie is nutso.
Yeah, look it up. It's something like Strong as I Am. That's what it's called, Strong as I Am.
Just perfect.
And then he kills the guy and takes the blind woman hostage. Forgot to mention, too, that in another scene where Will's trying to figure it out, he walks through the first victim's house, and he like is fully in the killer's mind at that point. And he imagines himself, as Hannibal said, like, I'm a god, I own this place.
He says that?
Well, basically, because he's like,
what part is this?
When he like opens up the door and he's like,
yeah.
I throw my coat because this is my house. This is where I live. This is what I want. And then he walks upstairs and he looks at the woman and she has like mirrors for eyes.
Yes.
That was cool.
Yes. Anytime in a movie when an actor is on a like, what is it called? Like a dolly thing. And it looks like he's floating.
Well, that was the zoom. They were doing the Jaws.
Because I love it in movies when
zoom.
Someone looks like they're floating and not walking. Like in Black Klansman, they do that, and it looks so.
Oh yeah, when they're in the hallway.
Good.
Yeah,
it looks so good.
Yeah, that one, the one in Black Klansman is the dolly, but yeah, this one was the lens where
same effect. Loved it.
Yeah, it's pushing in on Will, but then it's keeping him in focus. With a certain type of lens, and the background's out of focus, so it looks like the background is changing.
Yes.
And they're doing the same with the girl in the bed.
Yes.
And so it's like he's realizing something.
Yes.
It's used to great effect. And there's also, then basically get to the killer's house. He has the blind girl. He's gonna kill her. Will's stalking from the bushes. They're supposed to wait for backup. He immediately goes in, smashes through the window.
And it should be noted that the killer has this woman hostage in his home, and she is trying to just figure out what's going on, and there's loud music playing. So it's just, her senses are completely just gone. And Red Dragon is in the bathroom and smashes the mirror, which he has been known to break mirrors.
Yeah.
And he takes a shard, and he has been known to murder with broken mirrors.
Yeah.
So he is going to do the same to this woman. So he is about to cut her throat with the mirror.
Yeah, and then Will breaks in, and there's this firefight, and it's edited kind of weird. It's a pretty weirdly edited scene. I think it works in a really artistic, strange, cool way.
Sure.
But at the same time, it's like I could see someone watching that scene and not liking it.
Yeah.
I just was fully okay with what it was doing. You know, shot at different frame rates. It's even edited to where like certain seconds are repeated.
Well, I think it's interesting because in this whole movie, we've gotten into the mind of the killer. And a lot of the times what you want is for that Stellan Skarsgård and Daniel Craig moment where they get to talk about it. It's like leading up to that moment. And we don't get that in this movie. There's no Red Dragon and Will Graham talking.
Yeah.
But we don't need to because that's what Hannibal's character has done. We've been in the mind of the killer the whole time and have been able to talk to him. So...
Well, and I think with the scene of Will walking up the steps and seeing the girl with the mirror eyes, like we have had that scene in a different way.
So it's like, I think a little part of me was like, it felt a little anticlimactic, but at the same time, the whole movie has been about this.
Yeah.
So it works.
And then Will kills him.
Yeah.
Because he's about to kill him. I mean, it's like righteous kill.
Yeah.
You know, and because in the grocery store, his son asked him like, "Are you going to kill this guy?" And he said, "That's not my job. I'm just going to help him find him." But then he makes the decision to like aggressively save this woman.
Yeah.
And so aggressively
and this man
save
has already
this woman.
killed like
That's a
3
weird
police
way to
officers.
say it. But
So
yeah. So, and then we're back at the beach. He's back with his family. He's got a nice scar on his face.
because he got cut with the mirror.
Yeah. And he seems like he is not doing like he seems like he will recover, but he's not in a good place.
Yeah.
But he will get better.
They're right back to talking about the sea turtles that are about to hatch, like at the beginning of the movie. So it's like things will go back to normal.
Yeah. And my goodness, I just am gushing about this movie. I mean, if you can handle movies of this nature, this is like, I'd put it in the top tier. I would be like, put this right up there with your Sevens and your girl with, I'm just naming Fincher movies, but like,
he's pretty good at that type of movie. So
I mean, he's like perfected
Prisoners. Don't forget about Prisoners.
Prisoners. Yeah. Put this right up there and put this right up there with Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
Which is like regarded as one of the best.
We'll get to talk about another serial killer that serial killer is based on.
Oh, the Ted Levine character?
Is that the actor's name?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who's the guy?
The chief from Monk?
Oh, yeah. But he was the guy in Jurassic Park 2.
Yes.
Which, by the way, I believe it was the wrap party for this movie. A friend of one of the actors showed up. A not well-known actor or anything like that.
And it was Ted Levine?
And it was Ted Levine. Just like
whoa,
hanging out and like, I think or maybe it was the premiere and got to like see the movie first and everything and got to hang out with everybody. Later, he's going to be in The Silence of the Lambs. So, or it's just Silence of, it's not the, right? There's no
I don't know.
Anyway, couldn't recommend it enough. Great movie.
Mm-hmm.
We're in February and
what a perfect, nothing more perfect than covering a series about murder and serial killers in the month of love. But it also is my birthday month, and this is what I would have wanted.
That's true. That's true. This was a big Jordan pick. And whenever you choose a series, it's usually our most popular series. So I'm assuming that this is going to be...
You just jinxed it.
One of our bigger ones. Actually, I would imagine that this movie won't be, but the next ones probably will. And maybe we'll be able to convince people to go back. Because it's just not as well known of a movie.
Oh, yeah.
This month on MPU, the sequel on Patreon, a couple days ago, we came out with an episode on Zoolander.
Oh, okay.
So, if you want a real change of pace...
I forgot we talked about that.
Yeah. The patrons chose Zoolander.
That's actually perfect.
Yeah, it'll be a nice
comic
reprieve.
relief.
And if you're new to the podcast, patreon.com/MICAHMCCAW. And there's a link in the description. Sign up for as little as $3. Once we get 50 patrons, we're going to launch another Patreon podcast called The MPU Goes to Emeryville. And we're going to cover the remaining Pixar movies and any future Pixar movies. So we need 50 patrons. $3 a month, cup of coffee. I mean, come on. Come on. Thank you for listening. Next week, it's Silence of the Lambs.
Okay.
Bye. Who's that peeking behind the bars? That's Hannibal. Who's that played by 4 different stars? That's Hannibal. And whose face is detachable? Let's Hannibal. And who's everybody's favorite cannibal? Let's Hannibal.